And finally, for the third kind of multiplication that you can perform on vectors, that one, as we saw, was called the cross product. So the major difference between the cross product and the dot product, and it's one that is very useful to commit to memory, is that the cross product returns a vector. So the output or the result of operating on two vectors using a cross product is a vector. So once again, given any two vectors A and B, the cross product is denoted as this. So you write the vectors A and B, and in between them you put an X. And it returns some output C or some other vector C. But like I said, it's important to remember that cross product yields a vector. Right. And that vector in this case was the vector C. Some characteristics of the resulting vector C, characteristics of C. Right. Let's rewrite that clearly. I put a little dot there that I shouldn't have. So characteristics of C are as follows. One is the magnitude, right? So magnitude of C, which can be denoted as 2 bars and C in between. The magnitude of C is magnitude of A multiplied by the magnitude of B. So those are two scalar quantities times sine of theta AB. Right? So actually let me write that again a little more clearly. So we have the room sine of theta AB. Right? So the sine of the angle between two, and that theta AB is same as before. So remind ourselves that same as before, or by what that I mean that it is determined the same as before. So determined by the same process as shown in the previous pages, right? Determined same as before. Pardon me, the E's sometimes don't get written as well when you use one of these digital pens that is used to like write. Okay. The second thing that we need to know is the orientation of that vector C. So that's another characteristic of C that is very useful for us to know when we perform cross products, right? So this is pretty straightforward. If you have a vector A being crossed into the vector B, the resulting vector C is always perpendicular to both A and C. C is perpendicular to both A and B. A and B. To think about this a little more is, say you have a vector A and another vector B, then the resulting vector A crossed into B is either out of the page or into the page. In this case, so far I'll tell you that it turns out that in this case it is a counterclockwise vector that points into the plane of the paper, right? So that third thing becomes the sense, right? Sense is the right hand rule. Sense of the vector, that means is it pointing out or is it pointing into the plane of the paper? Sense of the vector C is given by the right hand rule. And we will go over this through many problems in the classroom, but one way of looking at it is if you take the vector A and you sweep it into the vector B, if you use all the fingers, not the thumbs, but if you take all the fingers of your vector, of your hand, of your right hand, by the way, and sweep it into the vector B, or curl it into the vector B, or curve it into the vector B, then your thumb is left pointing in a certain direction, and that direction tells you the sense of the vector. So it's given by the right hand rule. So I highly encourage you to place your fingers on your book along the direction of the vector A. So all your fingers are, just take your fingers and point along the direction of the vector A and sweep or curl those fingers into the vector B. Then you'll be left with your thumb pointing out, either into the screen or out of the screen. It should be into the screen in this case. B cross A, on the other hand, would result in a vector that is pointing out of the page. All right. So yeah. Oh, and I made a little mistake over here. This should have been a clockwise rotation, because if you remember what we did earlier in the lecture, we were talking about how vectors that are clockwise point into the screen and vectors that are out or counterclockwise point out of the screen. So note that little correction over there in the arrowhead. I hope you made that note. Yeah. Okay. Continuing. So these are the three important things. So you have on the previous page we had magnitude, right, which we highlight over here, and then we have orientation, which is the second important thing that we need to know about the resulting vector C, and finally the sense. So angles and sense. Orientation says that it is perpendicular to both, and in which way is it perpendicular? Is it pointing out of the page or into the page is given by the right hand rule. All right. And if you have any questions about the right hand rule, we will be starting office hours that accompany this homework, and we'll teach you more about how to perform that multiplication and get that right hand rule down very concretely for us. Okay.